All right, this tutorial covers the 3D virtual content that we can work on inside of Photoshop. So I have here a soda can that was created inside of Maya, a 3D application that's used for animations, for games, for movies, for virtual reality. And this tutorial shows how to make the textures that appear on 3D assets. I've got my layer window open. My layer window, if I were to make sure that the sub-features are open here, you'll see the word Untitled 1. If I were to double-click on that, now I'll just roll my cursor over, it shows me the texture that's wrapped around in 2D fashion on that model. If I were to double-click on that, it gives me the actual texture that wraps around this asset. Now, it's always wise to save out a separate file as you work on this, because at some point the connection between the Photoshop file with the texture and the actual 3D can break down, and it's a little messy trying to get it back on. So it's always a good idea to save out the PSD and work on it separately. So I'm going to go to File, Save As. You're going to notice that the format extension is PSB. That's for really large format files. That is kind of a 3D thing. If I wanted to, I could change the format to a Photoshop file. Either one will give us the same results. So once I've got the name I want, I'm going to hit Save. Now I can close out the 3D can for the time being. And I'm not going to save that change. So whatever I make in here will eventually be put inside of the layer window for the can itself. So next I'm going to go and develop a little bit of a label here based on standard Photoshop skills that you may have acquired already. And then I'll return and we can talk about wrapping it back onto the 3D virtual can. Okay, I've gone and I've developed a bit of a label for the 3D can, and now I'd like to get that onto my original 3D content. So I'm going to gather all the pertinent layers together into a group. I'll Shift select, I'll go down, click on my group icon, I'll name it label, and now I'm going to go to the 3D can itself, and I'm going to double click on that Untitled 1 again, and it's going to show me my original label untouched. So our objective is to get what we made here into there. So now that I have it in a form that I can kind of move very easily from one spot to the other, I'll click on that group and I'll drag it and drop it into the destination. Now what I'll do is, with the whole thing still selected, I'll drop the transparency and line this up a little bit nicer than it looks now. So I will V on the keyboard, and then I'm going to hit 5 on the keyboard to drop the opacity of the whole thing down. So each of those layers is now at 50% opacity. I can place this where I'd like it to be. And I'll hit 100 again to bring it back to full opacity. And when I hit Command S to save now, and go to 3D can, there is my 3D virtual file with the content on it. Now I will hit V on the keyboard, and if I've got the first icon selected, just past where it says 3D mode in the option window above, I can now move that into position the way I might want it to go. Now I want to see the name of it and a bit of a 3/4 view perhaps. Maybe I'll tip it a little bit to break up the monotony of a vertical file. A diagonal is always desirable in the context of our design. And I'm going to fix the lighting. So I'm going to go to Windows, and I'm going to go to 3D, and Windows, once again, I'm going to choose the Properties window. And I'll put these side by side so we can kind of see what happens as we proceed with this. So if I was to go over now to the 3D window and click on the term Infinite Light, the Properties window now reflects what I can do with that particular light. You'll see an icon on screen that can be manipulated manually, but it's much easier now with the Property window to click on the little icon that appears at the bottom of the Properties window. So I'll do that, and now my lighting is pretty much the way I want it. Now, depending on what you will be doing with the background on this, you may not want the drop shadow that comes in by default. I'm going to turn that off as well. I'm going to go ahead and I'll hit Command S to save on this. Now I'm going to start working on this a little bit more, and then I'll come back and show you where I have left off. Now I've gone and developed a background that I would like to start using. So now that I've got that, I want to work on the can a little bit more and make it more well integrated into the background. So I'm going to develop some values on either side of the can, choosing some colors that may appear in the sky behind, some of the green perhaps from the background where the foliage is, to tie this all together as one. So what I've done now is, if you look at the layer window, I've gone in and our original 3D file, I've hidden that away, I've duplicated it, which is up here at can number 2, and I've also rasterized it. You're going to notice that once the file has been rasterized, that layer with the can, that it is clear of the little cube that you see in the lower right hand corner. So now it is simply photo content, and that just makes it a little easier to manage what I'd like to do next with this. So I'm going to start by integrating some of the colors that I see in my document to tie this all together a little bit more cohesively as far as color and value are concerned. So I'm going to hold down the Command key, and I'm going to click on the thumbnail of the can inside of the thumbnail here. And you'll see you get the marching ant, you'll get that selection of the shape of the can. That's pretty much what we want, because we want to isolate whatever changes we make to the area of the can itself. I'm going to go down and introduce a new layer. I'm going to name that layer Value Right, and I'm going to get my eyedropper tool by hitting I on the keyboard. Now I think I'm going to use one of these reds. I think I'll use that. And I'm going to get my brush. I'm going to use a soft edge brush. And I think I'll keep the opacity about 100%. And I'm just going to paint on the right hand side of the can. Again, I'm on a blank layer. Now I've got a color that perhaps I can use, but I want to be able to see through to the content below. So I'm going to quickly go through the different blend modes. Now the blend modes appear over in our layer window up where we see the word normal. Now you can click on these individually, which really becomes kind of a nuisance. So if you were to make sure that you were on your Move tool, I'm going to hit V. I can now use Shift and plus or minus on my keypad to quickly go through the different blend modes. So I'm on my Move tool, I'll hold down my Shift, hit plus on the keyboard, and you'll see that you start to preview the content below mixing with that color tint above based on those blend modes. Now hard light is a possibility. I can always drop the opacity of this. I'm just going to go through them, keeping in mind perhaps hard light might be the way to go. Color looks good, so I'm going to go with color. I'm going to hit Command D to deselect and Command S to save. Now logically perhaps we wouldn't see the same kind of color at the top of the can. I don't want to lose that horizontal surface, so I think what I'll do is I'll throw a layer mask on, and I'll get my brush and I'll reduce the size of it. I'll just go in and knock off where it falls on the top like so. Now I'm going to do the same thing on the other side with a different color, and then I'm going to put a defining white bright line on that cylinder. Together we'll do that, but first I'm going to go and introduce that other value on the left hand side, then I'll come back. And you can go ahead and do that based on how we did the value on the right. Alright, so I went in through some green on the left hand side just to tie it in with the comp below here. And once again, I'm going to go through the blend modes. Hard light looks like it might be a candidate, but I'm going to continue and check out a few more of those blend modes that are available to us. So once again, I'll make sure I'm on my Move tool by hitting V. I'll hold down the Shift key and hit plus on the keyboard and just quickly sample these and see what might be an alternative to the hard light. So I think I'll go ahead and go back to my hard light, and I'm going to drop the opacity, so I'll hit V on the keyboard, and I think maybe if I hit 6 on my main keypad, I can drop it to about 60%. That could work for now. I'm going to save that. Now I'm going to put a defining white light where light would hit a cylindrical or a spherical surface, for that matter, where there's a very bright spot, and it's all contingent upon your vantage point. Let's assume that our light is coming from the upper left-hand corner, and we probably have some white light perhaps falling on this just in off the left-hand edge of the can. So once again, I'm going to hold down the Command key. And I'm going to click on the thumbnail with the can itself to put the marching ants or the selection around the area that I'd like to drop this white light into. I'm going to introduce another layer, and I'll name it white light. And I'm going to hit D on the keyboard to go to default so that I've got black and white on my toolbar. And I do want the white on top, so I'm going to hit X. And X is simply the keyboard click to swap out those icons on your toolbar. I'm going to hit B on the keyboard, and I'll get my brush. I'm just going to bulk this up pretty big, and you'll see why the size is insignificant. My opacity is 100%. My flow is also 100%. I'm just going to go ahead and paint along the left-hand edge quite a bit here, just to make sure I have a good fill right along the edge of the selection on the left-hand side. I'm going to go to my marquee tool. I'm going to hit M on the keyboard. Now, I'm going to do one of two things. Either I'll use my marquee tool inside to move this manually, or if I wanted to, I could use the right arrow. Now, be careful. Make sure that you are on the marquee tool, because if you're still on the move tool, you're going to move the white content. And that's not our objective. We want to move simply the selection. And you'll see why in a moment. So I'm just going to drop this down a little bit. And now I'm going to hit delete. And what we just did was we eliminated what we didn't want. And I'm going to get my move tool now. And you'll see that what we've got now is the making of a very defined point of light falling on this cylindrical surface. So now that I've got the shape I want, I'm going to run the Gaussian blur on this to make it a little bit more believable. So I'm going to go over to the layer named White Light. I'm going to right-click on it. I'm going to choose Convert to a Smart Object. And this is going to allow me to decide what I want to commit to as far as that blur goes. So it's going to be the opportunity to go back and try something new without destructively editing that layer. Once I've converted it, I'm going to go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and in the Gaussian Blur, let's see, I guess maybe I'll go with 5. This is all very subjective. I'll hit OK. Command S to save. Now, once again, I'm not sure as far as the blend modes. Maybe there's something that would work that would give us a little less of this opacity and block out the word fusion below. So I'm going to make sure I'm on my move tool, hold down the shift, and I'll start to hit plus on the keyboard and go through these different blend modes that are available. I think I'm going to go with overlay. It looks pretty good because it's giving me that brighter light, but it's also allowing me to read the content on the can. Now, this is kind of up the top where it goes across the top. The can is illogical. It wouldn't fall on a surface like that. So what I'll do now is I'll rasterize my layer, and then I'm going to add my layer mask, hit B for brush, and I'll knock down the scale considerably. And I'm going to go in and just get rid of it right in this area. And if you have it hanging off the bottom edge as well, you can go ahead and get rid of that as well. I'm going to hit Command S to save. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put some faux condensation on the outside of the can. I'm going to start the condensation layer by creating a new blank layer. And then I'm going to make sure I've got my default black and white on my swatch tools on my toolbar. So I'll hit D on the keyboard, and now I'm going to fill that whole layer, blank layer, with the black. Now I could hit G to get the paint bucket, I could paint it in, but I'm going to hold down the option and hit the delete key to fill the foreground color of the swatch into the layer. Now once I've filled that black, I'm going to go up to Filter, and I'm going to go to Render, and I'm going to choose Difference Clouds. Now, the difference clouds come up, and this is not quite what I want, so I'm going to use a keyboard quick to keep applying the filter till I get the pattern that I think would work well as some condensation. So I'm going to hold down Command and Control on the Mac, and I'll hit F on the keyboard. And I'm looking for more something like this, but I'm going to keep going until I see something. I guess I'll go with this. So you can see I've got a pattern that's a little bit more active. Now I'm going to use my wand tool. I'll hit W. And I'll set the tolerance for about 50. Now I'm just going to click on the brightest value in there, and I'll right click and I'm going to choose similar. Now once I've got the selection, I'm going to go up to the top of the user interface. I'm going to choose select and mask. And I'm going to smooth this 100%. And you'll see what happens to the edges of your selection momentarily. So you're going to soften it quite a bit. Now that's pretty much going to work for what I want. So once I've got that, I'm going to click OK. Now I'm going to paste it to its own layer. So I'll hit Command J. And I can now throw out the original layer. So I'll go ahead and delete that. I'm going to zoom back so we can see the whole document window here. Now, this is a little loose, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale this down. So select that layer, hit Command T. I'm going to scale it down so it's about the width of the can, maybe a little bit greater, like so. And I'm going to duplicate this. Now, there's a couple of ways we can do this, but I think I'll just hit Command J. And then with my move tool, I'm going to pull this down like so. So it's just below the other one. There's a bit of a seam here, but I know if I flip that vertical now by hitting Command T and then flipping it vertical, I can kind of put these together like so. So I'm going to merge those in my layer window. And now I'm going to put these on the can. So I'll Command T, I'm going to rotate it a bit, scale it down, maybe like so, just to optimize what I have here. And I'm going to find the blend mode for this. So once again, I'll make sure I'm on Move tool. I'll hit V on the keyboard, hold down Shift, hit plus, until I see something that's going to work. That could work pretty well. Multiply looks good. I'm going to keep going though because I might find something else I want. This is pretty subjective at this point. It really depends on the values and colors of your label. Now that one looks pretty good, but I'm losing that pattern in here a bit, so I'll continue through. I think I'm going to go with hard light. Now once I've got what I want there, I want to edit it so it follows around the contour of the can. So once again, I'm going to hold down the Command key, click on the thumbnail of the can itself to silhouette out the shape I want, and then I'm going to click on the layer mask icon, and now I've got that. So I'll save that, and I'm going to get rid of where it falls across the top of the can. That would be kind of illogical, so I'm going to get my brush with the layer mask I've got, and I will just go in now, and I'll just knock out at the top here. Now another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put some condensation on the sides, but I'm going to have to use the pen tool for that. You'll notice there's a slickness to this 3D content in the context of the photo, so we're going to use the pen tool to put some beads of liquid on the side of the can. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in on this so we can get really close on this. And I'm going to add a new layer. And I'm going to get my pen tool. Now with the pen tool, I've set it for path in the left-hand corner. Now with the pen tool, I can go in and start to draw something that would look a bit like perhaps how condensation might accumulate and gather on the side of the surface. I'm going to go in and draw this shape. And once I have the shape I want, I'm going to right-click and I'm going to choose Make Selection. I'll click OK. I'm going to zoom in on this a bit so we can see a little bit more closely what's going on. And I'm going to get my eyedropper tool. I think I'll get one of the darker values over on the left here. And I'm going to get my brush, and I'm going to keep a soft edge brush. I'm going to drop it way down in size. And now if I were to go in and paint along the very edge of this, you can see that you can start to put together kind of a faux drip, the way the liquid might gather on the surface of that can on the outside. So let me deselect and move that in a bit. So you can see now how quickly and easily, if you manage painting that edge precisely, that you can kind of fabricate what looks like a drip of fluid. Now I'm going to zoom in here one more time, and this might be something that isn't really necessary, but if I wanted to, I could take this one step further with white. But once again, I'll get the brush. I've got the white on top. I'm going to make this really small. And I'm going to drop the opacity way down to maybe 20%. And then I'll go in and I'll start to put a little bit in here where you might pick up a little bit more light. And I think I'll drop the brush down even smaller as I go up along the edge of this now. And just like our can, there might be one point where the light falls more pronounced and brighter. So if I zoom back on that now, you can see we've pretty much made a convincing drip. And that's how we would handle the perimeter of the can. If I wanted to, I could put those on the interior as well. So that's a nice way to kind of make this a little bit more believable.